My name is John Dawson, and I'm going to do a short video on glazing and scumbling. Well, you might have seen this painting somewhere before. It's my understanding that Leonardo did about 20 or more layers of glaze in painting this. It's no wonder it took him nearly forever to do it. This is not what I'll be showing you in this video. It's way too tedious for me. There are plenty of videos out there that show how this old master technique was done. What I intend to do is to show other ways of using glaze in a much more contemporary way. To demonstrate what I mean, and before we get into some of the more technical aspects of glazing, I thought I'd give this quick example of the use of glazing to create shadows in this particular painting. This is actually the finishing touches on this painting, where I'm using a dark transparent glaze to create the shadow. And this is a detail of the finished painting. We should take a minute to talk about the materials. In order to make the oil paint transparent, it needs to be thinned down with a painting medium. There's a couple different commercial painting mediums out there that you can use. One that I like is Liquin. It's made by Winsor Newton. Like a lot of Winsor Newton products, it's a little overpriced, but it works very well, and it doesn't have any particular odor. Another popular commercial painting medium is by Grumbacher. I think Grumbacher makes about 3 different variations of painting medium. The one big disadvantage is that it has a strong odor. You can also make your own painting medium. The formula for that is 1/3 turpentine, 1/3 Damar varnish, and 1/3 stand oil, or you could also use sun-thickened linseed oil. If you're going to make your own painting medium, you should probably use real turpentine and not paint thinner or mineral spirits. The one slight disadvantage to using your own formula is that it takes a little longer to dry. Now, concerning the paint, on the back of each tube it will be labeled either transparent, semi-transparent, or opaque. In some cases it will have a little square. If the square is completely white, that means it's transparent. If it's half white, half black, that means it's semi-transparent. And of course, if it's completely black, that means it's opaque. Theoretically, transparent and semi-transparent paints are best for the glazing technique. However, I don't find that to be completely true. There's a lot of opaque colors that work pretty well for glazing. Burnt umber, raw umber work real well. In some cases, yellow ochre and cadmium red light also work well. The one thing you don't ever want to do is to mix white into the paint. Once you mix white into the paint and add your painting medium, it will go milky and totally useless for any kind of transparent glazing. Now, you can mix the painting medium with the paint directly out of the tube, which we will be demonstrating here in a minute. But you can also mix the colors together, and sometimes it makes a much more interesting glaze. For instance, alizarin crimson and burnt umber mixed together makes a pretty nice glaze. So I would encourage you to try using colors mixed together rather than just straight out of the tube, to find other combinations of glazes that you can use. I'll be mixing the paint with the paint medium on the palette to show what the colors would look like once they're thinned down. The very first color there was Payne's Gray. The second is Manganese Violet. The third is Prussian Blue. The fourth one is Alizarin Crimson. The fifth one is Burnt Umber. And the last one is Burnt Sienna. As I mentioned earlier, you can make some nice glazes by combining colors. In this particular case, I'm using some Prussian Blue and some Burnt Umber. This makes a very nice greenish glaze, which is good for all sorts of things. Unfortunately, it's hard to really see the color on this video, but it does make a very nice glaze. The next one that I'll be doing is a combination of Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson. And this makes a very nice purplish maroon sort of glaze. This is a combination of burnt umber and alizarin crimson, and it's very useful for quite a few things. And then the last one is a combination of Payne's Gray and Prussian blue, which is a nice moody sort of color that's great for certain things. It's good for shadows and quite a few other things. Here I'm applying the glaze over the top of other colors. In this case, it is alizarin crimson, and as you can see, as I put the glaze over different colors, it changes. It's more orange over the yellow, it's kind of a pink over the cream color, and even though it's a little hard to see, it is a nice dark, rich color over the burgundy. This is a burnt umber over the top of the pink color at the top there. Then you can see that it changes quite a bit over the top of the orange. And over the cream color, it's different yet. This is Prussian blue, and over that mauve color, it's changes it quite a bit. It'll turn this to green, and over the cream, it's kind of a aqua color. This is a glaze made from one of the colors we mixed earlier. It's a combination of Prussian blue and burnt umber. And as you can see, it makes a nice green color. This glaze is made from a combination of Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson. Glazes are usually applied with a dark transparent glaze over a lighter color, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you want to put a dark glaze over a dark color to make it even darker, to create a moody effect or a shadow effect. This last combination is Payne's Gray and magnesium violet. Glazes can also be applied in multiple layers. First you have to let the first layer of glaze dry. Then you can apply a second layer over the top, creating yet another layer of color. This technique in many ways is very similar to transparent watercolor. Another possibility is to apply the glaze in the usual way, and then once you have it covered the entire area that you want to apply it, to take a rag or a paper towel and to rub the glaze off or rub it down so it has a softer and more subtle look. Then later you can also go over that with a second coat or a second layer to create more dimension to the glaze. This is a quick example of scumbling where you drag the brush lightly over the top of the surface of the canvas. This usually a light color over a darker color. This particular surface that I'm working on is canvas paper, and it doesn't really have the tooth that a normal canvas would have, so it doesn't work quite as well on this. I'm putting an abstract in this part of the painting, and glazes can be very useful in doing abstracts. I'm putting a layer of glaze down, letting it dry, and then adding another layer of paint. It gives that layer of paint a little more dimension And then in some cases, I will actually go back and put another layer of glaze over it and another layer of paint. And this is a detail of the abstract and that part of the painting when it was finished. I started this painting by painting an abstract in the background, and after it was dry, I'm putting over a glaze of cadmium red light and burnt umber. Once that glaze is dry, I put other glazes over the top, some of burnt umber and others of burnt sienna. And in this area, I'm applying a glaze of Payne's Gray. This is an example of scumbling, where you drag a loaded brush over the surface of the canvas. One of the tricks of scumbling is to make sure that your brush is very, very dry. And a way to do that is, after cleaning it in the paint thinner, then you take a paper towel and blot it until all the paint thinner is out of it, and then load the brush and drag it across the surface of the canvas. In this area of the painting, I'm using a raw umber glaze to accentuate the folds and the shadows in the gown. And then in some areas, I will use a paper towel to wipe off some of the glaze in order to soften some of the edges. On the arms, I'm using a cadmium red light glaze in order to add more color to the shadows. Once again, I'm applying a raw umber glaze to the bottom part of the gown. And then in some areas, I will scumble over the glaze in order to give the shadows and parts of the gown a greater feeling of dimension. This is a detail of the gown and the finished painting. And this is a photo of the painting when it was done. In the background of this painting, I wanted to make it look like prehistoric cave paintings. So on a highly textured background, I used a number of different glazes, mostly made from various earth tones: burnt umber, yellow ochre, and burnt sienna. The real advantage of using glazes in something like this is you can see through the glaze to the drips and splatters underneath. And it's really ideal for making things look as though they're old or faded or disappearing. And so, as you can see, the transparent nature of glazes affords the possibility for all different kinds of effects that you can achieve. This has been just a few of them. Well, this pretty much concludes the video on glazing and how to use it. I'll follow this up with a few photos of the finished pieces and web addresses for my Facebook page and website.